Defensive driving techniques are at the heart of Connex Rail's train driving policy. The adoption of these techniques by all our drivers will contribute towards a marked reduction in the incidence of signals passed at danger, or SPADs as they're universally known. The results of a SPAD are always potentially very dangerous. One thing's certain, no driver would be involved in a SPAD voluntarily. So what can we do to minimise the risks? Well, one area of risk, particularly to the less experienced driver, is that arising from poor rail condition. At certain times, and particularly during the autumn leaf fall season, the head of the rail becomes contaminated. This causes slipperiness, or to put it more technically, it lowers the rail adhesion factor, making it more difficult for the train wheels to grip. Railhead contamination can also happen at certain locations all year round, due to industrial pollution or certain natural conditions. This lack of grip can make it difficult to start the train. The wheels spin under power, providing very little traction. However, more importantly from a safety point of view, this lack of grip can cause the wheels to lock up during braking. The effect of this is to extend the distance required to stop, sometimes quite dramatically. Before we look at what you, the driver, can do to combat the effects of low adhesion, let's just look at some of the on-train technology. Most of the large Connex fleet of modern multiple unit trains are fitted with wheel slide protection. This software-controlled equipment references the rotational speed of each axle to the other axles on the vehicle. As soon as it detects any tendency for a wheel set to lock up, in other words a wheel that slows down compared to the others, it partially releases the brake on that wheel set. It thus adjusts the braking effort on each axle up to the maximum the rail adhesion will stand. What's more, it does it very quickly, much more quickly than any manual control of the brake could achieve. Of course, there's always the danger that all the wheels will lock up simultaneously. Surely if this happens, the wheel slide protection, or WSP as it's known, will simply think that the train has stopped and do nothing. In fact, it has a very clever way of addressing this problem. Every few seconds, the brake on one axle is fully released. If the train is moving, this wheel set will immediately rotate and, in so doing, tell the WSP software the real speed of the train. The most important thing for a driver to remember about WSP equipment is the simple fact that it can react much more quickly than you can, and that it will minimise the stopping distance even in the poorest rail adhesion conditions. Later in the programme, we'll see how WSP works in some very poor rail conditions, and we'll speak to some drivers after their first experience of these conditions. Not all Connex trains are fitted with wheel slide protection. The older Class 400 series EMUs with their clasp brakes are not fitted. So in poor rail conditions it falls to the driver to manually adjust the braking to prevent wheel slide and minimise stopping distances. We'll come back to this a bit later. Some of the more recent types of multiple unit train, for example the Class 508 and the new Class 375, are also provided with sanding equipment. With this equipment, sand is delivered to the railhead immediately in front of the wheel to restore its grip on the rail. The application of sand is controlled by the WSP equipment when the brake controller is placed in step 3, or emergency. Now that we've looked at the train equipment that's there to help you in slippery conditions, we need to consider forewarning that these conditions might exist. The most obvious forewarning comes from observation. Look at the weather conditions. The first onset of rain after a long dry spell will cause the rails to become slippery. Damp, misty weather conditions will have the same effect. Certain seasons of the year bring slippery conditions. The most notorious is the autumn leaf fall. In addition to your own observations, warning of low adhesion is given in various publications. The rail track sectional appendix gives details of known locations where low adhesion hazards can be expected. These hazard warnings are updated in the periodical and weekly operating notices. When you attend for duty, read the late notices carefully. Look for details of expected low adhesion conditions on that day. Now let's look at the driving technique you should adopt if you have any reason to suspect slippery rail conditions might exist. If wheel slip occurs when starting or accelerating your train, you'll know immediately that conditions are slippery enough to cause braking problems later on. Don't let wheel slip continue unchecked. It can cause damage to both the railhead and the train wheels. Move the power controller back to the off position, then select notch 1. Now rebuild your power slowly to avoid further wheel slip if possible. On the older Class 400 EMUs, you may need to hand notch to prevent the power being applied too quickly. When the rail is very slippery, it's often the initial burst of power when you open the controller that causes the slip. A good tip in these conditions is to maintain a small brake application, take power, then release the brake. This technique graduates the application of torque to the wheel and gives you a smoother start. The same technique can be achieved on the networker or the Class 375 with the combined power brake controller by holding in the hill start button. When you suspect that conditions might be a bit slippery, carry out frequent running brake tests. This will give you a feel for the rail condition and you'll be able to adapt your driving technique accordingly. The golden rule is this: if you've any reason to think that low adhesion conditions might be encountered, brake earlier and brake lighter. In these conditions, the distance you'll need to stop can be very extended, even doubled. Take extra care on your final approach to a stopping point, be it a station platform or a signal at danger. A low-speed wheel slide could still cause a run-by. If necessary, take all the speed off the train well in advance, then approach the stopping point at walking pace. Connex trains fitted with wheel slide protection are those equipped with 3-step brakes. In low adhesion conditions, you should make an initial application in step 1 or step 2, depending on the unit type. If WSP activity starts at the head end of the train, you'll see it on your brake cylinder gauge and you'll hear it operating, rapidly releasing air from the brakes. The speedometer might also start to swing wildly up and down. If you feel you need it, you can increase the brake to step 3, but whatever you do, don't attempt to counter the wheel slide by manually releasing the brake. In these circumstances, you must trust the WSP to act efficiently in reducing to a minimum the stopping distance required. Also, don't forget that, however alarming it may seem, the rapid WSP activity at the head end of the train is helping to clean the railhead, giving the wheels further back a better chance to grip. If you start fanning the brake yourself, you'll only confuse the WSP equipment and take much longer to stop. The older Connex trains are equipped with the Westinghouse automatic air brake combined with the non-automatic electro-pneumatic brake, known as the EP brake. These trains don't have wheel slide protection, so if you begin to experience wheel slide, you'll need to partially release the brake to get the wheels rotating, then reapply. In other words, the action you take with these older trains is the exact opposite of that for WSP-fitted disc brakes. Manual adjustment of the brake to counter the tendency for the wheels to slide. Finally, with all types of unit, if your stopping distance is becoming very extended and you're in danger of overrunning a station platform or passing a red signal, make an immediate emergency brake application and leave the brake controller in this position until the train has stopped. Now it's time to join our first group of drivers at Ockley. The technicians from AEA have created a simulation of low adhesion conditions by contaminating the railhead. This will give our drivers their first chance to experience train handling in conditions that would normally be quite dangerous. Here, of course, we're the only train on the line, so the training can be undertaken in complete safety. Before the first driver takes the controls, the group is briefed by a driver standards manager. With the briefing over, it's time for the first driver to take the controls over the simulated low adhesion section.
Up platform, you'll see the light, see the post and the light. When we see that, we shut off brake application 2, right? Yeah. Right, see the platform? Yep. That works. You would have stopped. We'll try a bit of defensive driver this time, we'll make it early, so we know it's a bad one. Okay, shut it off. Bit of defensive driving, we'll manage it. Okay.
It's been worth coming to start.
Oh yeah. Certainly now you'd understand, like when you do put lead brake in, you just lose, you see the speedo drop and everything, you know that you just got no control really, you just have to wait for a train to take over.
What else is highlighted?
Well, also you need to brake a lot earlier than you normally would do in perfect conditions. So basically, brake a lot earlier.
The concept of a defensive drive is to prove the safety of ourselves, our company and yourselves, and improve the standards. And all that you need to know thoroughly your routes for defensive driving. If you know the capability of your route and your traction and yourselves, then you can preempt things. You need to be forward thinking a lot of the time. So you need to be forward thinking, know your limitations, know the signs of low rail adhesion. If you know what the symptoms are and the signs are, then you can preempt and react to them. You want to be proactive rather than reactive. You need to think of the vulnerable situations. The weather changes can be minutes. It can be nice and clear one day and foggy, very misty, very wet, and then it's come across a dry bit of rail, and then 500 metres, a mile and a half later, it can come into a leafy covert which is very wet. So you need to be constantly aware and vigilant. Brake early and use minimum brake. Always plan to stop before you intend to, so especially run onto red lights, you need to plan to stop 200 metres beforehand, so you're in control of that. You want to be running over that magnet about 15 miles an hour. That's what you need to plan for. The distance required to stop may become doubled, so be aware of that. And it's the last few 50 metres to 100 metres that's critical, because you've got your speed down 10 miles an hour and you think, oh, I'm safe. And it's, as you've seen today, that last bit, it just plods on at 5 miles an hour and doesn't seem to want to come to a stand. They're the things you want to take. Very careful on your final approach. And finally, don't allow yourself to become distracted at crucial moments. And again, that's at the low speed end. At the high speed, everyone's aware and you're alert. At the low speed end, you seem to switch off. So don't let yourself become distracted.
A week later, we joined another group of drivers on the Bromley North branch. The same simulated conditions had been applied, but this group are driving a Class 466 networker.
You've now spent 2 hours up on the Bromley North branch experiencing the WSP, how it works, all the noises, the sounds, the actions of the train, the braking technique, the styles. Have you enjoyed your sessions here? Have you learnt anything from it?
It's nice to know what to expect out there come the lethal season.
I think it's shown doing it at different speeds, the different reaction that you get from the train and the different stopping, with just sort of like 5 mile an hour difference, what it can make.
Yeah.
So that's useful to know, certainly.
Now you're going to drive defensively. Are you quite happy that once you know that conditions are bad and you know how the WSP is going to perform, that you can stop the train in the right place?
Yeah.
Yes, I felt it was beneficial to experience these under controlled conditions. So I think that'll be beneficial for the future.
For both groups, this has been an invaluable experience, gained under simulated test conditions in complete safety. It means that when they encounter low adhesion for real, they'll have solid experience to fall back on. So, we've looked at some of the causes of low adhesion conditions, the on-train technology provided to help combat the problem, driver awareness of weather and other factors which cause low adhesion, and defensive driving techniques to minimise the effects of such conditions. Don't forget that the drivers we saw were handling 3-step brake units fitted with WSP equipment. Older tread brake units without WSP must be handled in a different way. These newly qualified drivers have not experienced a leaf fall period before and will have learned a great deal from these simulated conditions. Other long-standing drivers will have experienced this for real in previous years. However, the problems encountered and the lessons learned are identical. This program supports the techniques covered within the Connex Train Driving Policy booklet. In it you'll find a more detailed explanation of the topics we've covered here, as well as some important instructions on reporting procedures when you encounter poor rail adhesion. Read the booklet thoroughly, and if you've any questions, your driver standards manager will be pleased to answer them. Don't forget that low rail adhesion is a potentially dangerous hazard. Extreme low adhesion conditions may be likened to black ice on the road. It's only by understanding and applying the correct driving techniques that the dangers can be minimised. Defensive driving is an all-year-round technique to be applied by drivers of all ages and levels of experience.
Forewarned is forearmed. Drive safely.